I'm Tony Heaton, I'm a sculptor. When we started to curate Altered as an exhibition, I was reminded of a quote that I read at the Venice Biennale, and it was the first exhibition in the Academia by a living artist, Georg Baselitz. And I read this quote and I thought it really resonated with me. And it's, you cannot escape your history and the trauma of your experience. And what are the echoes that follow you? And for Baselitz, it was about his childhood in Eastern Europe back in the early 1940s. But I think it's a kind of universal quote, really. I've kind of been making sculpture for a long time. You know, I formerly trained as an artist. I went to art college and I went to university after art college to study sculpture. But even doing that, I still feel very much an outsider because of the nature of the work, I guess. So my work is like, how do I transform an idea into three-dimensional form, really? That's pretty much what I do. Well, the exhibition that's coming to Leicester, it's coming to the Attenborough, is called Altered. It's a series of works that I've made over a number of years. But there's something about all the pieces that are altered or changed in some sort of way that sometimes it's really obvious and sometimes it's less. And that's part of the game of it, to look at the work and sort of see what's going on. And some things you'll see straight away and some things will be slightly more ambiguous. You know, so for, say, a piece called like Raspberry Ripple, for instance, which is a big neon piece that's in the show. It's made out of pink neon, so it's bright, it's kind of sexy, the lettering's, you know, very playful. And Raspberry Ripple, it has connotations. For disabled people, it's rhyming slang for cripple. So, well, you know, politicised disabled people will talk about being a raspberry or being a cripple or a crip, usually we would talk about. So it's kind of an in-joke. There's layers to the work. So you can embrace the work on different levels depending on how you want to respond to it. Because the thing about Raspberry Ripple as well, one of the acts of subversion was to leave out the P out of raspberry because it's a silent P. So you dispense with one of the P's and nobody notices it. So it's this idea of, for disabled people, is that idea of deficit. You know, we're often talk about deficit model of disability. If you are perceived to have something missing or being lesser, you know, I use a wheelchair. People are very unimaginative around disability. You know, it's about movement. You know, I have people say, oh, it must be awful using a wheelchair. I say, do you ride a bike? Oh, yeah. Do you not like riding your bike? Yeah. For me, pushing my wheelchair around is like skateboarding or riding a bike. You know, I talk about wheelchair ride, or I don't. You know, it's kind of a joy. The problem comes when non-disabled people put barriers in the way. Steps, cobbles, you know, no-drop curbs. You know, the world is built for people like you rather than people like me. And a lot of my work speaks about that. Sweet Meeting, which is essentially a large polo mint carved out of Carrara marble. And immediately people see that, they go, oh, it's polo. But of course it doesn't say polo, it says loop. So it's just a simple anagram. But it's very difficult for people to see the fact that it says loop rather than it says polo. So it's kind of a joke, I suppose. I think there's a fair bit of humour in pretty much all my work, really. It's serious, seriously intentioned, and yet kind of there's elements of subversion. The Zen Girls, which are two very large female forms, sat on a bench, and they appear to be in tension. You know, they appear to be leaning back to back. But if you look carefully, you'll notice that the bench doesn't have any legs. So how the hell are they holding the bench up? You know, is it possible? Playing with people's perceptions, I guess, in some of the works. And this idea of what you see isn't necessarily what you get, because for disabled people, you know, they often say you got 7 seconds to make an impression. And the impression I make immediately is, oh, there's a bloke in a wheelchair, you know, oh, how am I going to deal with that? So my interaction is always, you know, with strangers is always couched within this phenomena of disability, really. To accompany the altered exhibition is a 100-page catalogue, which we were very fortunate to get funded by the Henry Moore Foundation. And there's a couple of essays by Alan Sutherland, who's one of the foremost disability arts writers. I mean, I'm surrounded by my work all the time. It's familiar, and it's that familiarity. You don't really see it anymore, and then suddenly, you know, it's in a gallery space, which is an interesting space to look at work. It's all been dusted off and cleaned and put on a plinth or hung on a wall or whatever. And you read it in a different way because curators will put together the work in different ways. So it's a new experience. I think if you don't know anything about disability, if you don't know any disabled people, or you don't know much about art, I think you'll still enjoy work that's in the exhibition.